for cleaning the road. My wife, she was my girlfriend at the time. She stayed behind and kind of helped clean up the mess, and I got transported into a little village where I was able to get some help. And then we ended up going back to the scene of the crime, and all the stuff had been moved into Vizcaíno, and it was held there by the police. And, when you have an accident in Mexico, it's not a civil crime. It's a crime. It's a criminal thing. And you have to prove sort of your innocence, and they're going to hold you until you either pay up or they find out that you're completely innocent. So anyway, we went back to Guerrero Negro. It was probably another hour to get back there just to sit it out for a week. And I sat it out there for a week trying to decide if I was going to be able to make it back down to Cabo, or I was going to have to get back to the States, because I had some injuries on my chest, and I kind of opened up my head quite a bit, not to the bone, but the skin had been definitely opened up, and I was all bandaged and sewn up. And there's a lot of components to this story. Make a long, kind of ended so I don't go on forever. The whole thing went on and on and on until finally we were able to run into a girlfriend of Sheila's who was coming down on a kayak trip. We were able to get all our stuff into the one truck that was left. My car was totaled, and we ended up driving down back to Cabo. One of the things that I thought was always an interesting story is the people who I met and who saved us. I went to their house later because I had lost 3 kayaks off my roof, and they kept them for me for the week that I was gone. And when we were leaving, I said, I don't really know your names. What's your names? And the lady says, well, I'm Mary, and my uncle here is Jesus, and his brother is Angel. Of course, it was Maria, Jesus, and Angel. But it gave me goosebumps because that's a pretty ironic situation that, that would be the names that saved me. So that was a beautiful thing.
Right.
And then when I got back to my house down here, we were hosting a yoga retreat, and there was 10 beautiful yoga women who actually took care of me and took my stitches out, and we came out okay with the thing. And I'll tell you, my Mexican insurance paid off, and we look back on it now as just another amazing experience in the Baja. And we're very, very fortunate and lucky that we escaped, the way we did. So
you say escaped like you were fleeing for your life. That's not really the case. I mean, you there was a process you had to go through, and there were people there to help you. And at the end of the day, you had a tragic or traumatic experience that ultimately panned out all right. And I think it's something to mention here is that, I mean, yeah, it could have gone another direction for sure. But the horror stories that you hear about traveling and or crashing in Baja, those exist, but there's also stories just like CJ's that, none of it is good. You don't want to crash a car, but it all worked out. It all worked out. You got the help you needed. Doesn't sound like you were raped over the coals by anybody, and everything worked out to your favor, with the exception of a pretty gnarly scar on your forehead.
Yeah, there's a little bit of action. It actually erased some of my wrinkles and added one. But most people, they don't even notice it. So it's kind of. I thought I was going to have plastic surgery afterward, but the doctor who sewed me up happened to be a specialist in. I think I don't know if he was a plastic surgeon or what, but he definitely cleaned me up pretty good for what could have been. And I mean, all I got to say is that when you're traveling in the Baja, again, you need to be prepared. You need to drive during the day. Don't get caught places at night. It's a very, very dangerous, narrow road. I would say 98% of the time, you're not going to run into any bad guys. They're all good as long as you just go from point A to point B to point C and stay in good places. And, once in a while, you might take a detour out to the ocean or something and camp. But, I would still probably, unless you know a place that you've been to and it's safe, always kind of be where there's other people. Don't put yourself at risk, and realize that the Baja people themselves are really, really wonderful, helpful, loving people. And at one point, Mary, who had that place, she said, here, you can sleep on my bed. I mean, she was giving me her bed. I mean, it was the graciousness of these people never ceased to amaze me. Really fantastic thing.
Yeah. Definitely on that one. I was just sitting here thinking about how you were talking about the different charitable organizations you're involved with, and you were bringing up, I think it was SAFE and or a few others that were focused on the animals. And we can't not mention the revolving door that your home has been for wayward animals. Man, I mean, in the time that I've known you, there's have to have been 20 or 30 dogs that have gone through your house and either stayed there, lived there, and died of old age, or you passed them on to other people at certain times, right?
That's correct. Yeah, because I have a large piece of property, and I know the lady that runs the Humane Society here. I get called occasionally to help. I usually take the ones almost no one else wants to. I have a lot of room and space, but over the years we've been able to find forever homes for these dogs with my guests. For example, there's a couple places up in Canada. One's called Positive Match, and they have a whole Baja section, and we get these dogs pictures and get them on board, and people take them and we get them up there. We work with Alaska Airlines pilots, and they bring them up for us. There's different ways, but it seems like I always have about 4 or 5 dogs here. I guess I just like the pack thing, and I mean, I'm looking at like 3 or 4 of them right now, and I'm in my little, I get up in the morning, it's like I have to be careful where I step, because it's, they're like the little throw rugs everywhere. But, they bring me a lot of joy and a lot of love. And by taking care of, creating these groups, these Humane Society groups, we've really, really eliminated a lot of the animals that you see hit alongside the roads. And also we've had big drives for the dogs to be neutered. This is a wonderful thing. The lady that runs this place has a drive every year, and she'll sometimes get up to, she'll get like $150,000 to $200,000 in donations, and that helps her run her organization for the year. So, my dogs and my animals. I've tried to have cats, but most of my dogs don't particularly care for cats, and I love them too, but I can only do so much, and but it's just another way of giving back, and it also creates a better society here, that we don't have animals running around sick and dying or just getting hit by cars.
Yeah, no, I've always been impressed, I guess, with your willingness to bring on, like you said, the ones that nobody else wants, because there's been some really mangy mutts that show up at your place.
Oh, man.
You nurse them back to health, that's for sure. So I'd mentioned right when we started that I call you Chris, I call you CJ, and we didn't get much further, and I've never asked you this before. Obviously your last name's Johnson, so Chris Johnson, CJ, but you started to talk about when you first got to Mexico, and then I cut you off. So who calls you CJ, who calls you Chris, and why?
Well, it's kind of started from the the surfing experience, and also my skiing. Actually, it might have even started earlier when I lived in Lake Tahoe many, many years ago. But for some reason, maybe CJ just comes off the tongue in a way, a poetic way, and it rings. And so a lot of my friends started just calling me CJ, and most of the time it was because it happened actually separate. It did happen in Tahoe, but it also started here because we happened to have quite a few surfers that were down here named Chris. So, I became CJ, and somebody else became, Amigo, or, there was always some other name that people had here. Surfers kind of go, a lot of times, seems like they have nicknames a lot of times, and so mine became CJ just because of the Chris Johnson thing and the amount of Chris's that lived in my neighborhood. And so I actually kind of like it. It's more of an individual, name, placard, I guess you might call it.
I go back and forth with you, and I don't realize it sometimes. So I thought we'd just bring that up so people didn't get confused. Hey, he called him CJ, then he called him Chris.
Surfers are kind of a strange brew, and I don't know. It's because it's not like we're running from the law, but I think we think of ourselves kind of as a sort of a tribe and a little bit, kind of on the outside reaches of society in a lot of ways. And so it seems like, names become kind of like, you grow into a name. You get named by your parents, but by your activities and the things you do, a lot of people end up, somebody says, hey, like my latest one, people are calling me Buzz Lightning. Now, why would they call me that? Oh, because I'm busy a lot and I talk a lot? Well, that could be. So I don't know.
Well, let's do this, CJ. Without naming names and without getting too incriminating, let's go back 30, plus years, and talk about the lifestyle and or the type of people that, I mean, the type of gringos, the Americans that were hanging out. I mean, we don't need to beat around the bush. I lived on Gringo Hill for a decade, and I know there's quite a few people, and quite a few people that are still there, and some people that aren't there anymore, that ended up there. How do you say it? They were in the import-export business?
You could say that. I would say, I think that's kind of where a lot of them base their early incomes on. Surfers like free time. They don't like to work. So they would try to find ways that they could support their sport without having to have a 9-to-5 type job. So years ago, some of the, surfers have always been adventurers, and they always say, if you want to see where the next great development's going to be, go to where the surfers go and where they surf, because we're usually the first ones on the spot. And so they, came down here in droves because they could drive, they could get here, and they just kept coming until they got to the end, and they built houses here. Well, in those days, you didn't need checks, you didn't need bank accounts. Everything was paid in cash, so that worked to their advantage. And so, at one point they said, this was years and years ago, if the IRS ever dropped a net, this was before you were there, Ryan, of course, but if they ever dropped a net over Gringo Hill, they would have come away with a full catch. And I can't say exactly who did what because I wasn't involved, and that way, they remain, anonymous. But it's that I always believe the things that people do will always come back. And so I think most of the guys here were pretty good guys, and they weren't into the hardcore drugs. I think it was more like in the flower business, which now has become kind
ironically,
yeah, which is always amuses me. Like that, it's like it was so bad at one time, and now it's socially, accepted that, or it's getting that way. And but we were a little bit ahead. Timothy Leary always said surfers are, we're go-ahead people. We were a little bit ahead of our own time because we were doing things from our passion. We were enjoying life as following our bliss. But at the same time, some of them made decisions to maybe not go down the straight road, and but many of them are still here. They have families, and they're doing really well, and they become very, very a big part of our community and helpful.
Well, I can say, regardless of how some of these people that we're referring to supported themselves in their early lives, regardless of even what they do today, what I can say that I've walked away from of my time living down there with you guys is, like I said, you're going to be 70 here in just a few days. CJ, geez, happy birthday!
Tuesday.
Yeah, wow.
I'm counting my last days in the 60 decade. I'm kind of nervous a little bit, but I'll get over it.
But what I can say from spending time with guys that I mean, I'm younger. I'm 46, and have spent a lot of time with older guys that lived 25, 30, and or more years down there, and man, they sure are healthy. You living in an environment like that is, in many ways, especially in the early days, low stress, slower paced. The guys that have found ways to make enough money to put food on the table and not live in squalor, they're relatively healthy and live full lives. You don't see the well, I would say my average 60 to even 80-year-old friends down in Cabo are mobile and active and out and doing things. They're not sitting in a chair eating Cheetos, watching television all day long, or dead. And I guess that's what I'm getting at, is that living there and seeing older guys and girls live healthy lives, stress-free lives, really kind of encouraged me to think that way, if nothing else. It's a little harder now that I'm living back in the United States to live as stress-free, but sure was able to see the examples walking around and spending time with guys that had made a conscious choice to try to eliminate stress and live healthy.
Yeah, that's very true. I mean, I believe that because of our sport, which was surfing, and now it's really broadened out to a lot of many different types of water sports and paddle sports and whatever, being close to the ocean. That's really encouraged